were experiencing government tyranny. You know, the propaganda that was going on was just on a scale that's never been seen on our television sets before. And yeah, some people couldn't see it. I could see it very early on, and was aware of it and wasn't prepared to shut my mouth for the sake of my paycheck. But I was 17 years as a professional footballer. I can honestly tell you, in all that time, I didn't see one footballer collapse on the field of play with a heart issue. Not one. People are starting to understand the deception that was put on them. I think there is definitely a huge awakening going on of people who are suddenly realising that maybe all of us that were warning against these things happening, maybe we're not so mad after all, and we did have a point, and perhaps they should look into how they can possibly do some detoxification in their body.
All right, everyone, we have a very, very special show today with a very, very special guest. First, I just want to introduce my co-host, Carly Spell, the mastermind behind Dark Matters, a community-based educational platform, and myself from The John Cooper Show. And our guest today, one of the most talented footballers England has ever produced, and I would also say one of the most important public figures at the moment in terms of truth-telling. It's Matt Le Tissier. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very good, thanks, guys. And you?
Brilliant, yes. Blown away. Starstruck, blown away. Really looking forward to it, yeah.
Don't be. I'm just a bloke who got sacked by Sky.
Which we'll probably talk about, if that's all right, as well, a little bit later on. But I thought it'd be good just to set the stage a little bit, because obviously I grew up with you, Matt, and I was a Spurs fan, and there was almost like a little bit of sadness in my heart when you didn't go to Spurs, because I thought you played the Spurs way. I felt like you had that artistry, that poetry to your game. Firstly, where did that come from, do you think? Because you had a very, very unique style that not many sportsmen even have. It was like the closest thing I would say is like a Ronnie O'Sullivan, a Jimmy White, a Sevi Ballesteros. Where does that kind of artistry for you come from? Is it just repetition, imagination, gift from God? What is it, Le God?
Yeah, I think probably a little bit of a gift from God, but also I think it comes from having a good imagination, being able to picture things, being able to see things before other people see them. And just there was also an element of repetition in there as well, because there was a lot of practice that went in as a kid, mastering the football, basically, and just kind of every spare moment I had, I would be playing some kind of ball sport. And I would advise this to any kids who want to be a sports person in a particular sport. Don't just play one sport, play a whole host of different sports, because everything helps your coordination. And I would say growing up playing kind of tennis, table tennis, cricket, hockey, badminton, all those kind of sports, I took something from each of them sports to help me in my football. And so, yeah, there's a whole combination of things, I would say.
Wow. So what could you get from, let's say, hockey? How would that kind of infuse itself into the footballing side?
Well, at hockey, I was actually the school hockey goalkeeper.
Oh.
And so I got to understand from a goalkeeper's perspective which were the points of the goal that I felt were most at risk when somebody was taking a shot. And I took that to my football, and so I kind of understood where the goalkeeper's most vulnerable parts were.
So to speak.
I say that to kids actually as well who want to be professional footballers. Go and play in the opposite position to what you play, and see what gives you problems, and then you'll know when you go back to your position what the best way is of getting the better of your opponent will be.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's funny because we're going to come onto it later, but I would say that that's probably helped you actually understand what's going on geopolitically and seeing the blind spots that maybe some of your peers hasn't. But we'll come on to that in a sec, because I do have one more question for you about football, because it'd be rude not to. I'm a Spurs fan, and I grew up with Glenn Hoddle, and that was actually the reason why I fell in love with Spurs. And I know that you admired him and maybe based a lot of your game on his, maybe, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what was the reason? Why didn't you want to join Spurs? I know you came so close in 1990. Was it because Gascoigne was there and you liked to be the big fish in a small pool?
No, not at all. it was something completely different. It was because I was just about to get married, and my fiance at the time wasn't very keen on going to live in London. So I had the decision to make. I either got married or I joined Spurs, and that was it. And I made the decision to stay at Southampton. To this day, with my hand on my heart, I don't have a single regret about making that decision. I don't have any regrets about the decisions I made in my football career to stay at Southampton Football Club.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did, because I mean, loyalty is a bit of a dying thing these days, and you did unbelievably well at Southampton. The first midfielder to get 100 goals in the Premier League. But you're an incredible poet and artist on the field. Can I ask you finally, why don't you think that we produce so many world-class talent, footballing talent anymore? Because I think back in the 90s we had so many great players. Even at the lower end of the table, we had such wonderful players. But nowadays, you don't really see it so much. Is there a culture change in football? Like, what do you see has changed?
I think the biggest problem with that is that we stifle players' talents at an early age to mould them to fit into a team. And I think that's why we don't really appreciate the Mavericks in this country very much. We don't appreciate people who can do something a little bit different, because they might not work as hard as one of the other players, or they might not get back into their defensive shape as quickly as the other players, because they've tried to do something a little bit different, and they've wandered into an area of the pitch where they really shouldn't be if the manager got you to stick to his tactics. So I think that was always embedded in English football, that they've always kind of really turned their nose up against players who were a little bit different and didn't fit into the team structure. We've always placed hard work and teamwork above ability in English football.
Yeah, and it's becoming more like that now. I see it's more like bricks in a wall, rather than allowing these great players to kind of flourish and build a team around them. And maybe that's perhaps why Hoddle was sort of overlooked for England, and yourself, you were overlooked quite a lot of the time. Maybe because they just didn't know how to handle someone with your talent and trying to work the team around that. Would you say that was part of it?
Well, the ironic thing is that Glenn Hoddle was one of the managers that didn't pick me. So you could have thought I might have been a little bit more sympathetic to my cause.
Yeah, exactly.
It turned out not to be, sadly, but I think there were other issues, other reasons for that. Because I think I was often compared to Glenn a lot during my career, the way we played. And yeah, I don't mind admitting that I based my football around him. He was my hero as a kid. He was the reason I wanted to be a footballer. I wanted to be able to do everything that he could do. And I believed that I could do everything that he could do and score more goals at the same time. And I don't think he appreciated the amount of people that would compare me to him, because I got the feeling that he felt he was like way above me in terms of ability on a football pitch. So I think that might have had something to do with it, but that's something that only Glenn himself would be able to answer honestly.
Yeah, I think maybe that was the case for Gascoigne as well, but for the '98 World Cup, even though Hoddle won't quite admit that, but I think that's also the case, but we'll leave that one there. Okay, I'm going to leave the football now, because Carly was sitting there wondering, letting two guys talk about football for an hour. But obviously you retired in 2002. You had I think 3 years off, and then you went into you went to Sky Sports and you became a pundit there. Carly, I don't know if you also any questions at this point, but I was just going to say, it looked like you had a great time there with your buddies, and it felt like you really enjoyed it, and you kind of all were genuine friends with each other, and that really came across in your punditry. But did you feel as though, as the time went on, the kind of culture changed within Sky Sports and it became a little bit woke? And Mark Lawrenson talks about it at the BBC. But did you notice any culture changes there?
Yeah, I mean, there was a big change when the American owners came in. And it became a completely different company, really. The people I speak to now at Sky who won't say so publicly, they don't enjoy working there anymore. So it's a tricky one. I didn't actually have 3 years off when I retired from playing football. I was actually working for Sky a little bit, but I wasn't under contract to them, so I was kind of a little bit on soccer Saturday when people were off. on holidays and sick and all that kind of stuff. So so I never really took any time off. I did the media work. I was doing a bit of freelance work for other companies as well. And yeah, it kind of all changed when the Americans took over. And yeah, I guess with me being kind of quite outspoken on some of the issues around the response to the COVID stuff that was going on in 2020, I wasn't really towing the party line. I was criticising the mainstream media, even though I was employed by one of them, but I didn't think, I felt like if I was going to criticise the media, I couldn't be a hypocrite and not criticise the people that I was working for. So yeah, I included Sky News in my criticisms of the way that the fear mongering that was going around on the television at the time. And yeah, I don't think they appreciated that very much, but I kind of knew that it would probably land me in trouble at some point. But I felt like the issue was too important for me not to say anything and just to sit back and take my paycheck and just carry on as if nothing was happening, when in fact the complete opposite was happening. And we were experiencing government tyranny, quite frankly. You know, the propaganda that was going on was just on a scale that's never been seen on our television sets before. And yeah, some people couldn't see it. I could see it very early on and was aware of it and wasn't prepared to shut my mouth for the sake of my paycheck.
Good on you, mate. Good on you. Vindicated as well.
Well,
Carly, isn't he? Isn't it? I mean, Matt is the god now, is he not? For what he's done and how he's come out and been a spokesman for us, and he's created a bridge as well between the moderates and us as well. We're trying to speak the truth, but Matt's done an excellent job in trying to create that bridge to really bring the truth out, hasn't he?
And I think it's because we have all been so programmed and brainwashed to respect authority in the way that we have, the guy in the white coat, the doctor, the teacher, and so on and so forth. And obviously we know that's purposely done from our schooling, and then that continues on and forward, doesn't it? So people like yourself, Matt, who are willing to risk what you risk and lose what you've lost, as we've all risked and lost for speaking out, and all of us as a collective. But yeah, it's kind of it's so important because people respond to it. It's kind of like, I mean, I go into the occult and the esoteric and I break down the language and the symbols and the codes and all this kind of thing. But I'm also LLB honours, so when I told people that I'm a lawyer, then they go, oh, and then and it's funny because I've not said anything different, and people will respond differently. And you've got a lot of respect. You've got a lot of respect from people in your field. So it's and look how many people who had fame and had celebrity didn't say anything because it was just too much for them to lose. So absolutely, 100%. It's and it's so important, and there's not enough of it. So yeah, awesome. Yeah. You are the maverick, Matt. You are the maverick. Yeah, you're maverick. Talk to me, Goose. Talk to me, John. Yeah.
So now this must have helped then. Going back from your childhood playing all the sports. What was it for you? How did you start to see what was going on? Why were you able to have that kind of full perspective and on everything? Do you think, like, whereas some of your peers didn't?
I think Carly probably just touched on it there without realizing it. But the whole indoctrination about deferring to authority, to teachers and to doctors and all that stuff. I actually didn't as a kid. I was kind of quite rebellious to authority, and I think that's one of the things that I've had all my life, where I didn't just accept somebody's opinion because they were a doctor or because they were a teacher. I had an ability to be able to think for myself. And I didn't automatically trust somebody just because of their title. And I always remember getting into a bit of trouble because I questioned the referee in one of my school football matches from another school. Like, we were playing against a school, and the referee I felt was cheating for his team, right? And I wasn't prepared to just sit there and shut up and say nothing. And I would question the decisions, and then I questioned him after the game as well, to the point where I basically told him I thought he was talking out of his arse. I was only about 11 or 12 years of age at the time, and I got marched back. My school teacher marched me back the car and took me to back to my house, and took me back to my mum and told me what a naughty boy I'd been. So I got in a little trouble with that. So I think that was the thing. It was always being able to be big enough and brave enough to not be bullied into thinking that something was right just because somebody's in a position of authority.
Absolutely. I actually think that when children rebel,
I got asked to leave the brownies, Matt, for asking too many questions. That's the true story.
Yeah.
All this and everyone just doing as they're told because they were going to get a badge. I was like, nah, something's
Yeah.
not right about this.
Nah.
And they asked me to leave.
And
I was always the same.
I was going to say I think the rebellious kids, they are, I think, instinctively rebelling because they're trying to maintain their individuality in a schooling system where they're trying to force the conformity onto the child. I think it's their natural instinct to rebel. That's just my personal opinion on that. And you know, some of the greatest talents, you know, in all sports, I think a lot of them do have that edge to them where they are slightly anti-establishment. You know, like the Maradonas, the George Bests, the Paul Gascoignes. I mean, you know, that the list goes on. Ronnie O'Sullivan's, Jimmy White's. There's a little bit of a kind of a streetwise bit of a vibe to some of these people, you know. So I think maybe that's coming through in their sport, Matt. Right?
Maybe, although I was a little bit surprised at Ronnie. I mean, he was still elbow bumping people, so he didn't get COVID. Like...
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah. And I think I was watching one of your interviews, Matt, and you were saying that you were basically when this started, and I called 2020 the year we all got our 2020 vision, right? So if you hadn't seen it before, and I've been awake over 20 odd years, so as soon as it came on the TV, on the black box, you know, I was like, oh my God, this is it. They're going for it. You know, I knew what it was. And I think you were saying that, you know, you sat at home and you had that time and you're just seeing that something's not right. And then you started to follow the money. So you were looking into the Gates Foundation, because it is always that I say, follow the patents, follow the money, read the paperwork. You know, I wish I was making this shit up, as I say, but and it's that ability as you as a critical thinker and all of us as critical thinkers, which is what they want beaten out of us, to go, hang on a minute, and just trust in your gut. And then I think there was a famous Twitter tweet that you posted, and that's when it all kind of particularly kicked off. And I think you've said you think it's the Great Awakening, haven't you? You do believe it's a spiritual battle. So tell us, I mean, your head must have kind of like popped in so many ways, and we all go through different emotions from like anger to laughter and it's just like once you've seen it, isn't it, you can't unsee it. So that's like a whole range of emotions, isn't it?
Oh, it's definitely been a roller coaster of emotions, that's for sure. Yeah, but I mean, that back in 2020, when everything just kind of started ramping up, and I was like, hang on a minute, what's going on here? This isn't right. There's something just in my bones was just telling me that this is just something so bad going on here. You know, right from seeing the videos come out of China of the people just falling down in the street and then kind of breaking their fall with their hands. Just thinking, well, seriously, come on. I've just spent most of my life being told never believe anything that comes out of China because it's all propaganda. And then you saw these videos from China and everyone goes, oh, look at what's happening in China. We got to lock down the whole world. I was like, really? And that's when it all kind of started. I started looking at the Gates Foundation. I started looking at that was the big eye opener for me, was the United Nations Agenda 2030 and all their plans that they have in place for society that they're kind of still inching towards today. I mean, they're getting some serious pushback, but they're still trying to go for the digital currencies, you know, the 15-minute cities, all that kind of nonsense. And so, yeah, that was kind of my awakening moment. And I watched a series called The Fall of the Cabal, which if you haven't watched it, it's a fascinating listen. It gripped me. And I was like, oh, my God, all these kind of feelings that I had that perhaps down the years that things weren't right. And there was a lot of corruption going on in government and all that kind of stuff. And I watched this program and I went, oh, my God, I'm not only am I right, there's still so much beyond what I thought was bad is going on in this world. And I was like, wow. And that's why I couldn't shut up about it. I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop myself from speaking what I felt was the truth. And because we were only given one side of the narrative on the television sets, I was like, this isn't fair. And this is one of my big things in life, is things have to be fair. And I just felt like we weren't being given all the information that we should have been. So I'm a big advocate of hearing both sides of the story, and then being of a free mind to make up your own mind what you think is the right one. But we were just being bombarded 24 hours a day with one side of the story. And I was like, no, this is not right. This is not how things should work in a democratic society. And I come to realize quite quickly that we don't actually live in a democratic society at all. We have the illusion of democracy, and that's it, really, unfortunately. And it's a sad state of affairs.
And I think it's the deception and the deceit that bothers me the most. I'm very similar to that, because, like you say, if people are given the full information and then they make their own choice whichever way, because the thing is, it's that hidden in plain sight, but not so much hidden anymore. It's just in plain sight. They just tell us, and there's this kind of MK Ultra homogenized, brainwashed, fearful populace that just are all kind of, it's like the wildebeest. One kind of starts chucking itself off the cliff and all the others go with it. And this inability to critically think. Now, if the banking system, which we know the banking system's a deception, the legal system's a deception, if they actually turn around and said, oh, tax is voluntary, you don't have to pay us, we're going to go, oh, well, we're not going to then. Oh, and actually, when you sign those credit agreements, you're the creditor, you're not a debtor. And all that. They just told the truth, but they don't tell the truth. And that kind of bugs me. And ultimately, at the end, it's domestic terrorism. And they put the populace into such a fear, into such a submission for something that was basically like a common cold that was rebranded, the flu and cold rebranded, COVID-19, etc., and so on. Because corona means crown, and is the Latin poison, and it meant crown poison. So again, they're telling us in their language, they're telling us in their codes. But if you've got a populace operating from fear, people can't think straight when they're in a place, chemically speaking, even just on a basic anatomical level, from fear, can they, John?
No, it's mass formation psychosis. That was one of the words that came out, and it's mass hypnosis. We saw that even just through the double speak, the double binds. You can't be social and distance at the same time. New and normal, they're two opposites. So they're constantly using hypnotic language to befuddle us. And when in a state of fear, we go into the collective. It's one of the psychological traits that's already been talked about. So that's just how people have been acting. It's difficult to be that maverick, isn't it, Matt? I mean, what were your peers saying at the time? Were they listening to you? I mean, we were getting called tinfoil hat wearers and conspiracy theorists, because that's the language of the herd, to try and silence the mavericks, right?
That's exactly what they tried to do. But yeah, I mean, luckily my immediate family here were on board with what I was saying, so they didn't take any. My family back in Guernsey at one point thought I was a bit mad. And we had one of those family meetings where they had to have a chat with me. Wanted to have a chat with me because they thought I was losing my marbles. And sadly, it did take the vaccines, although eventually they have stopped after one or two. So there's been a massive shift, I'll say that much, from obviously the summer of 2020 through these last 3 or 4 years. There's been a massive shift in the way people talk to me. I even had some of my friends come and apologize to me because they thought I was mad, and then the penny dropped with them and they came and apologized to me. So all those things are nice, but that's not what you kind of do it for. But I do believe that we really are in a battle of good versus evil. I really believe that. And I always believe in humanity. I feel like there's so many more good people on this planet than there is bad, and good will prevail over evil. I have no doubt about that. It might be a long fight, but we will win. As I think it's the only outcome, because otherwise, what's there going to be left in the world?
Yeah. I was just going to say, unfortunately, what happened was general good people, they weren't doing what they believed to be right. They were just following orders. So they kind of absolved their own critical thinking skills and doing what they believe to be true, and just thought doing what's right, doing what the government are telling me to do is going to be
But
the
I
right
can't remember.
thing. And I think that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I can't remember who said it, but there was a quote about the people losing their minds as a collective and regaining it one by one. It was something along those lines, and that's something that I've kind of witnessed over these last few years, because just slowly, gradually, people are starting to understand the deception that was put on them in 2020. And don't get me wrong, there's still some people that are completely fully asleep and think the government are their friends and are there for their own benefit. But I feel like the majority of people now understand that the government is not your friend, and it's not doing anything to help you. In fact, it is trying to take as much money as possible off you through their taxation system, and they will keep taking it bit by bit. They're boiling the ethical frog, taking it bit by bit until you stand up and say, no more, I've had enough. And that's what we have to do as a collective.
Hey guys, just to let you know that YouTube actually gave this video a strike, the full interview I should say, and they deleted it completely off for medical misinformation, would you believe? And all Matt was doing was just speaking from his experience about what he's seeing. That should give you an idea of what we're up against here, and me trying to put this podcast together and really get the truth out there. The big tech censorship and the control of the narrative is palpable, shall we say. But if you want to watch the full interview, I'm going to put it on my Patreon where we can watch it without any interference. The link's in the description below, and yeah, you can watch the full interview there. Cheers, guys.